Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Geeks from the Multiverse. If I sound a little different, it's because I have a cold, so I apologize. But we have another great episode. We're doing our AI versus Hollywood. We're doing an experiment. Can AI create a better show than what's out there right now? We're going through it. We challenged ourselves to use ChatGPT to develop a dark sci-fi television series, and we're going to give it to you right now.
We're geeks from the multiverse. We've come to unite all geeks. Now it's time to get geeky and dive right in, 'cause we're geeks from the multiverse.
What's going on, everybody? I am Mr. Grumpy Beard. With me, as always, is John.
Oh, aka
Captain Lestat.
Captain Lestat. You know, everybody knows that by now, hopefully. But yes, so yes, Matt and I, I know he's done a lot of the pieces on this, but we've talked about it it seems like over the episodes, in the past where, we're always like, we need to come up with something, or we need to show what Hollywood needs to do, especially with a blueprint. Because, we've talked about different movies, different shows, all the shit in between. And now, we're like, you know what? Why not have AI write us something so that maybe, I say who knows, and maybe something could happen. I know Matt's like, there's no chance in hell. But again, you don't know. Somebody might, if we ever, something happens, shit, I'd be like, hey, man, look at that. Look. I'm like, there's our show right there. They might change the whole, concept.
Yeah, and it's not just letting ChatGPT write the whole thing. Obviously, you have to put the prompts in, and you have to put something in. To get something out. So there has to be some creativity going in to get something out of it. So it's really using AI to help us. Whereas, Hollywood is just writing to write. They're not using AI, or are they? I don't know. Maybe they are.
Well, so here's the thing, Matt. When you have literally a team of writers, we're talking, we'll say 8 to 10. Roughly, I don't know. I'm just throwing a number out. You can't tell me that 8 to 10 people can't figure out different ideas for a show or something like that. Where, I'm not saying that, when you look at ChatGPT or, some sort of AI based, app, to me, sure, you're going to have a lot of different ideas that AI is going to show you and things like that. But you would think that as humans, especially when you have a team of, let's say, 8 to 10, that you'd have different ideas or different things that you might want to play around with. This is, granted, it's one system, and we're talking
See, the problem is
millions of ideas.
The problem with humans is we all have biases and we all have our preferences, and I think that gets in the way.
True, and here's the problem.
Which
also.
is where we get to follow the fucking blueprint, because that's what happens.
When somebody has an idea, right? The problem is I also feel like they always don't want to always follow through. Right, because the way I look at it is too is for example, when you wrote that book, right? You really had no idea if I'm not saying it's going to be a bestseller overnight, but you still did something that you weren't even 100% sure that you originally were even going to plan on doing, but you said, you know what, I'm just going to do it, right? Like when George Lucas made Star Wars, he did it. Granted, he may not have had a lot of money to do it, but he had to find people, he had to do all that, but look at it now. Look how much money he sold it to Disney to at that time. But I'm just saying, there was an idea, he went through with it, and he revolutionized a lot of things. So my point is if you have something in place, and if you want to do it, just do it. You don't know where it's going to lead. And so, for example, like we said, we're now talking about an AI show, basically. We've came up with the idea. There's concepts, there's themes, there's characters, there's storylines, all the works, right? So, we're going to give you everything that we would think that maybe like you said, the dark sci-fi kind of TV show, and your job as the audience here, right, is to let us know if that's something maybe that's something you'd want to watch, or maybe there's tweaks or whatever. This is just a rough idea. It's not even a full every concept is already there.
Is it interesting? Is it not interesting? Does it suck? Did ChatGPT lead us down the wrong direction?
Do we need to go somewhere else?
We don't know. I think the idea is pretty cool. I mean,
well, it's different. I mean, for sure when I read it too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something that
it's certainly different. But this week we are going over, we're going to be breaking down the overall concept, a summary, why we think it'll work, maybe some reasons why it wouldn't work. Next week we are going to review all of the human characters, their backgrounds, as well as castings. And then the final week will be the aliens, breaking down everything about them, even the voice actors that would be providing voices or sounds for them.
True. Actually, real quick, two things. One, as we're recording, it is my birthday today. So, yes, I am officially the age of 32. And Matt's like, yeah, you fucking young motherfucker. No, it's like, you don't even understand what life is. Trust me, I am not saying that I am or not. But, yes, I am another year older, and here I am doing this episode. And I said, Matt, let's just continue. And I was like, let's record, man. I said that would be a cool gift for me. That's just me. And I know on his birthday, I mean, granted, he got a cool gift of being, getting a PS5. I mean, no offense. I mean, that's pretty cool in my opinion. I don't even think I could even get close to where you were. You were ahead on that one. Yeah. I'm just glad he finally got one. But anyways, the other thing too, I found out. I don't know if you knew this. This is going to sound weird. We're kind of talking about sci-fi here for a second. For the longest time, because I understand that the new. Well, let me rephrase this. Disney decided, of course, to drop the episode 3, 20th anniversary, even though technically it was supposed to be in May, not so much here, in of course, April. What I didn't know, and I really had no idea until just now, or I would say today. Did you know that Ian McDermott, the one that played Palpatine, he literally played that also in the 70s and in that time frame?
Well, he played the character back then, yeah.
Well, I had no idea because I didn't realize how old he was at that time. I mean, during that time frame, I looked it up, and he was only in his 30s when he was playing Palpatine. I was like, they got some major prosthetics for him, especially with that time frame. But I didn't realize that from that time frame in 77 all the way to of course 83, and then the prequels, and then the newer stuff. I was like, I had no idea he played the same character. I mean, that's 50 years. I mean, granted, it was one role, but I mean, in so many movies. But I was like, I had no idea.
And I mean,
same guy.
You're talking an iconic role, an iconic actor in an iconic role. Like, there's nobody better that could have done Palpatine.
I had no idea, though. I had no idea that it was the same person back in the 70s. I knew about, of course, the prequels and now, but I was like, I had no idea it was the same person.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple nuanced things, like, there's like a holographic thing that they show, I think, in like episode 5 or something, and it's like there's weird
weird bulgy eyes and
bulgy eyes, like that's actually not him, it's somebody else.
Okay, so that I think my dad was he was explaining that too, and I remember that.
Yes, every other time they show like the Emperor or whatever in the older movies, it's him.
Yeah, and it was weird because, like I said, I never knew that was him. Because I was like, damn, I'm like, I mean, I understand prosthetics and shit, but I was like, I had no idea. Like, we're talking when he showed up in, well, like it's 80. So he would have been probably his mid-30s at that time, literally just playing that role. I mean, he's now, I think he's turning 81 this year, but I was like, damn. I was like, crazy to me, doing that whole thing. But anyways, little fun fact. That's all I wanted to tell you guys real quick. But yes, moving forward to the idea.
The idea. So we have it's a dark sci-fi. It's not, obviously it's sci-fi, but it's not, your comedy or lighthearted. I would say more of your high concept, serious, much like, I guess, like a Halo or like a Mass Effect type.
I would kind of lean, I would say really kind of that Halo. I mean, maybe a little bit Mass Effect, but I think because I'm looking at like even just a logo a little bit, like it kind of reminds me more of that like Halo. I mean, and honestly, it's weird. It's like if I'm looking at that logo for a second, it kind of reminds me of like taking Alien a little bit with the kind of longer head a little bit, maybe not so. And then I was also kind of like thinking a little bit of Predator, but not enough to like, have like the dreads and, all that stuff. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would say from reading it, like from what we did last week, I mean, it's, you do have a lot of different elements, which is nice. But I think that with this show, it's not just like okay, I'm just going to copy and paste, some bullshit.
Right.
Like there are different elements of it, but it has its own twist. It has its own little thing.
Yeah, so I think with the title, I'm not 100% sold on it. And this is where ChatGPT really wasn't giving me something that I was really sold on.
Well, it's tough to come up with a really good title,
because some of the ones that I really liked were things that already existed.
True.
Like I loved Bioforge, which it's a video game.
True. And there probably is a trademark on it and all that stuff. So.
And then there was another one that was like Exoforge, which is another video game.
I love Forge for some reason in that,
Yeah, I don't know. So the name of the show is actually going to be...
Well, for the time being,
For the time being. I mean, this isn't a real show, but is Biofracture Broken Species. So obviously Broken Species is the tagline. I don't know if if there were multiple seasons, it might be Biofracture
something else.
But at least the first season would be Broken Species. But Biofracture would kind of be the name of the overall show. Which, I mean, it makes sense. Once we kind of explain a little bit about the overall.
Well, yeah, right. The overall or the overview of the whole thing. But so we'll start off with a little quick summary, just to kind of give you guys a heads up here. So the Braxiolites are a genetically altered alien species who are violent and oppressive. They rule over a vicious biohacked species of slag. Is that right? Is that how I say it?
Yep.
That are even more ferocious and hungry than that of normal species. Together, they are on a warpath searching for the rarest of resources so that they can continue to advance their species and take control of the entire galaxy. A once peaceful species that kept mostly to themselves, known as the Skrill, have been captured, tortured, and brutally experimented on by the Braxiolites. Born with a naturally evolved defense mechanism, biological abilities developed as a response to centuries of environmental threats, the Skrill became the targets of genetic manipulation. The Braxiolites saw them as living beings, but as weapons to be harvested. Through a cruel and torturous procedure, they imprisoned the Skrill in what does it say? Cartridge? Okay, cartridge. Like containers, altering their powers for use in specialized weapons, making them living ammunition in their growing interstellar, I can't even speak today, arsenal. But one Skrill, Grit is his name, hardened and scarred, becomes fueled by a singular mission: free his people and put an end to the Braxiolites' dark legacy. Out of the clumsy luck, Grit saves... Oh, what does that say? Grit gets saved by Kaze, a lazy, cowardly slacker who's never followed through on anything in his life. Grit sees something in him, a buried spark, and constantly pushes him to become something more. This sets them onto their journey and mission.
All right, I can do the rest.
Oh, now you want to do the rest?
Yeah. So later they're joined by the emotionally unstable Zig. So Zig and Kaze are, they're friends, but they're friends on the same planet. So they kind of do the same. They're like junkers.
Okay.
They do the same job, but they're like friends. So they're later joined by the emotionally unstable Zig, who teeters dangerously close to becoming what he hates. The battle-worn pirate, Blackmane, whose ragtag crew aboard the Marduk includes the cold and precise pilot known only as the Siren, the brawling alcoholic known as the Drunk.
Yep.
And a young, brilliant mechanic that everyone else nicknamed Cabin Boy. Cabin Boy!
Away! No.
Together, this unlikely team fights to liberate imprisoned Skrill, uncover lost truths, and unravel the Braxolite Empire one operation at a time, whether it's destroying a slag hive ship before it reaches a planet, rescuing captured rebels, or discovering hidden Skrill in the wild. With the Skrill, some Skrill want peace, some want revenge, and some want just to be free. So a big thing about the story is it's not about, heroes that were chosen. It's about, broken, unwanted, and desperate who decide to stand up and fight anyways.
It almost sounds like that new movie that's coming out, The Thunderbolts. And in a different way. You know what I mean? Like it's a ragtag crew that just they're broken, they're just unwanted, they're this and that, but they're willing to just say fuck it and give it a shot and just like bring it on, kind of a deal.
Yeah, but I think the difference is, with Thunderbolts and with what I would envision with this show is this show would be a little bit more raw.
Well, yeah, true.
Where Thunderbolts still has like that Marvel,
yes.
PG-13-ish style. It's still like kid friendly.
No, I know what you mean.
I would say like this would be
like
if it's not rated R, like it would be pretty darn close. Like
it'd be R. Basically, yeah, you wouldn't be watching it at. I would say like a teenager, like a PG-13 wise. You'd be like, okay,
this would be like your HBO Game of Thrones, show.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, like I don't know there would be like, sex like left and right, but like
no. But
the level of violence and the level of like gore and things that you would see in the show,
would be similar to that.
Would be up there.
No, I was just saying more with the Thunderbolts. I mean, yes, I agree that with Marvel, there's no way in hell that, they're ever going to be like that raw and like, they're going to show that like kind of like The Boys and that goriness and all that shit. Like
right.
This, sure, you could definitely, if it's like that HBO style, like, yeah, you could make it as gory and dark as quick as you want.
Yeah, not as over the top as The Boys.
No,
but I would say like more of that HBO. Like Stars level.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, seriousness. But like I said, it's not about like, most of these people that are, with Kays and Zig and Blackmane and her crew, they're not people who were just chosen. Like they're not heroes. Mm. They all have flaws and they all have things that are wrong with them. You have the drunk. Obviously, he's a drunk. All he wants to do is fight. The siren is, she's very, very cold. She's the pilot, but it's like she's also an assassin. So it's like very emotionless. And then you have this cabin boy who's just kind of like a mechanic. That's kind of, he's kind of the most normal one, I guess, on the crew.
Well, yeah, but if you think about it, it'd be like that young lad who's just starting out and learning about life, where these guys they've had some experience. They've had other things going on with them. This guy's like, hey, I'm new to the world. Let me talk to you for a minute. And then you're like, wait, kid, you need to back the hell up for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Kays is, would be the main character of the show.
Yeah.
He's the one that finds grit and, obviously being that cowardly slacker type character, the first thing that he always wants to do is run and go do something else. Like, True. He doesn't want to finish. He doesn't, he doesn't follow through on much of anything. Mm. Yep. So like once he starts something, he just doesn't, there's no motivation. Fair and enough. It's really, I think the relationship between, him and finding grit, that grit is kind of like that hardened, not quite like, I would say like, and I don't know the dude's voice, but he does a lot of like voiceovers for like the older kind of like gruff military veteran type characters. And they're like, but I could see Grit having that like, hardened, older military type, character voice, just being like,
yeah, I think I have an understanding of where you're going with, but I mean, actually, I'm going to say this, Matt, because I know you talked about this a while back. I didn't think you'd want to have like any militarized kind of way of,
well, no,
characters wise.
Obviously, I mean, Grit is an alien because
yes.
Grit is a Skrill, which, we're going to talk about that in the third episode, but the Skrill I guess they kind of look like a weird, if I had to sum it up like real quick, I guess it would kind of be like a weird, like a snail type thing. Like
I was thinking like a slug, a snail,
like a slug or a snail, but they have like tentacle things coming out. We're gonna put we have pictures of all of these. Characters,
there's definitely some pictures,
but they are small enough to fit in the cartridge, which the cartridges fit into these guns that the Braxolites created. So kind of right in the beginning part of the in the story, Kays is kind of doing his thing. He's like looking for junk, not really finding anything. Zig is much better at doing the scrapping and the junker stuff. Kays actually finds this like weird stone, and that's kind of all he finds. Brings it back, and everybody kind of laughs at him, and it's like, this is just a rock you brought us. So he kind of chucks it and was like, whatever, I'm done with this. And this is when the Braxolites invade their planet, and this does not take place on Earth. It's a whole different planet.
At that point, you might as well call it a different galaxy.
Well, it is. I mean, it's. I believe the planet I created was Palaxis.
Oh, Palaxis.
That's where Kays and Zig come from. And as soon as they start invading, what they always do is they don't just come down and invade. They send their slag first, which are kind of these four-legged, creatures. And what they do is they just send this like a slag hive ship.
Yeah.
And it lands, and they just run havoc. They multiply like crazy. Mm-hmm. Pretty much like eating and destroying everything. They don't have eyes, ears, or noses, so they smell by pheromone.
Okay. Yep.
And if you don't have the same pheromone as them, you're kind of toast.
So basically, you're the outsider. You're the black sheep of that crew.
So Kays, obviously, he just wants to hide anywhere that he can. He doesn't, he's looking around in houses, whatever. But he ends up finding a landing pod, which is one of the Braxolite ones. Mm. And when he goes to hide, one of their crates falls over and breaks open, and that's where he finds Grit.
Oh, okay.
And because he had found that stone earlier, the stone was actually what the Braxolites are looking for. Because that was actually one of the minerals and the resources that they came to the planet looking for.
Okay. All right.
So that was kind of where the story starts, and it's through this mineral that he's able to hear Grit's voice in his head. Because the Skrill also don't have mouths to speak; they use telepathy to talk.
Right.
So it's. He hears the voice in his head, and that's, obviously freaks him out. And, we're going to talk more about that. But, so it's kind of one of these things, he's hearing him in his head, doesn't quite know what's going on. You have on one end this, hardened military, voice in your head going, pick me up, you dumbass, shoot, and this kid is I just want to get the hell out of here.
What the hell's going on?
So they end up the course of the whole thing is I think it's a neat concept. Because on one end you have Grit, who's been, experimented on. He's been tortured. He's gone through, genetic manipulation to become this like weapon that, yes, when you do shoot them because they're living ammunition, it hurts them. But the only thing that he wants to do is find the other Skrill that they did this to. And so, like, that's kind of his main motivation. Like, that's their, like, motivation. Like, you took over our planet and, now we're all imprisoned and I want to set, like, our people free. Like, we deserve to be free. And the first person he runs into is this, like, lazy-ass kid who just wants to run.
He's a coward. He just sits there and doesn't want to fight, doesn't want to do anything.
Yeah, so then, obviously then Zig, who, he actually picks up the rock after he, Case throws it away. And this is kind of like filler parts of the story. Like, he picks up the rock, puts it in his bag. So later on, like, they're like, we need to leave before we get killed. And obviously Case is like, I can't leave without my buddy. I can't leave without my buddy.
My buddy.
So they save Zig and they head off to another planet. This is where Grit has history with Blackmane, and Blackmane they have an interaction, and that's where I think the episodes can be fluctuating, because this is like the planet that Blackmane is from is a smuggling planet. Like it's
okay.
And I think like you have moments where you can really create, things between like, Kaze and Zig, and you can create these moments where there's a lot of high action, but there's also a lot of elements of really high emotion too.
Yep. Okay. I would say for the story, that was just the beginning piece of that. But so far, I think that's pretty good, to kind of like start off like let's say the first episode and just kind of like introduce you to the, some of the characters, or at least some of the main characters, so that ones that you would know already, and not even like, because it's kind of weird, but like, like in some TV shows, they like, it's like the first season, what they should be doing is really introducing you characters, giving you a story plot, kind of giving you an understanding of kind of what's going on, and then hopefully by the end of the season, it would be like, it kind of leaves you with that cliffhanger, like, oh, what's going to happen next? You don't know, right? Where I think some TV shows don't really hit that mark. And I feel like, so far, even just a beginning episode like this, it kind of gives you the idea, oh, okay, so, we're learning about these species. We're learning about, these characters, and like, how is this kind of like evolving as we're going, kind of a deal. And it's nice to see that, we're taking an idea, and because it's funny, because a lot of times when you start a game or a movie or whatever, you got to have a starting point. And so it's like all of a sudden you're just like, oh, okay, so we're starting out, the way we're doing this right now. It's different, like being in a prison in that sense, but like, it's just, it's again, I think so far, if you're just hearing about it,
yeah,
it's not too bad so far.
If you're just hearing about it, it's weird, but I think one of the biggest confusing things, like when I was kind of like going through it, were the Skrill, because it's like, wait, how are they in cartridges, and how are they small enough to fit like in a gun?
True. And then if you think about it, how big do they get when they're out of the cartridge, or are they the same size when they get into the cart? You know what I'm saying? Like that would be the only thing.
I don't foresee them getting like bigger or smaller, but you have to think like too, like they're kind of like slugs. And like I said, I don't think that they're very big, and I don't think the planet they were from was very big.
True, but if you took the size of like what a slug is, roughly, generally speaking, they're not like terribly big, right? And granted, they could fit on our hands, like it's no problem. But you know what I mean? Like, would they would that be small enough to fit in those cartridges, I guess, per se? To be okay with that? Or
I mean, if you were only putting, the Skrill in the cartridges and you were closing the cartridges up around them,
true.
You're making the cartridge so that they can't escape out of them. But this is kind of like, the whole thing about the Skrill and the story arcs behind them is, it becomes more of like a rescue mission when they find the Skrill because, yeah, I mean, what the Braxolites are doing is really, it starts with the Skrill because they invaded their planet, drained it of its resources, and then not only did they find out that, yes, the Skrill have these like natural defensive abilities, but we can somehow use these to our advantage.
True.
And this is what the Braxolites do. They experiment on themselves and they experiment on everything else around them. And the Skrill, and just to give it like a little bit of a context, so each Skrill has a different, and this is because of the element that's on their planet. I believe I called it Skellium, is what AI called it. There were a few options, but Skellium was the better of the options.
Fair enough.
Believe me.
I could only imagine the other options, but
no, they weren't good. But Skellium was the better of the options, and Skellium it's like a rock, but it's more of a metal. It's kind of like an in between, and.
Well, so my question is it like, so you said a rock and like, metal. So I was thinking more, could it be a liquid? Could it be a solid? Could it be?
No, it's a solid.
It's just full on. So it doesn't matter whether it turns or anything like that. It's just full on solid no matter what.
That's a solid. I mean, I guess you could melt it down if you wanted to.
Oh, I'm just wondering. I didn't know if it was a constant solid or, because the way I was thinking of it, is it like a mix between like, I was joking here, but like vibranium or like, like a something like that, or does it have like a chemical
it's just
or
a mineral, bro? Oh, it's a naturally occurring mineral.
I'm just asking a question. That was all.
But it does help them to give off like a they connect with the Skellium to give them these natural defense mechanisms. So when they're attacked, each Skrill might look different when it comes to how they defend themselves. So one might, one might shoot out crystallized shards. One might have like an energy burst that comes out.
So, but again, it gives them some sort of power. That's
right.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's because of this mineral. And this is where I think for the show, the more Skrill that you introduce, now there's 4 main Skrill in the show. But the more that you introduce, the more kind of insane that you can get with these powers. I mean,
well, true.
You can kind of create whatever you can dream up,
True. True.
But that's what has occurred, and this is what they were finding when they encountered the Skrill, because they were finding that they were using these defense mechanisms against the Slags. So when they were able to actually imprison them, they found like, hey, we can actually encapsulate these and then use them as weapons. So now these weapons, if you have, say, a Skrill that can fire off crystallized shards, now you put that Skrill into the cartridge. Now you have a gun that can fire off crystallized shards.
Yeah, okay. I see where they're going with it, and that's why, reading that little piece. I mean, at first I was like, I kind of get it, but then
because the weapons themselves are actually made from that mineral too. So that's what helps,
which allows it to.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I mean, it's technology as well. I mean, it's their technology too, but the overall mineral that the guns are made from is that mineral, so that it helps but it's also painful for them to do that.
So once they're in there and like, let's say again, it's like that crystallized. So every time that they shoot, it hurts basically the skrill every time it happens. Okay.
Because it's forcing them to do it instead of them like naturally doing it.
Okay. I got you.
So yeah, I mean the whole point of the show, I guess, would be like, free. It's more of like the rescue mission. They're looking for the skrill. The Braxolites are your main villain. Aliens, them and the slag. Obviously some skrill that are, in the wild and they encounter might initially be hesitant. That they might not trust the crew. If you've been controlled by aliens and been experimented on, and there's a whole lot of trauma there.
Yeah, you wouldn't be trusting anybody at that point. I mean, nobody would. I mean, it doesn't matter. I feel like in any species, like
it's like one prison or another. I don't know
exactly. I mean,
so some may want to just escape. Some might want to join the fight. Some just want to stay hidden. But throughout the show, you'd have, each one could have a personal story about how the Braxolites like affected them. And I think that's what's cool too, is like, they're not just like weird slugs that they're like, hey, I just saved a slug, guys. Like each one of these skrill is like, it feels like it's a full character.
Okay. I mean, and again, I know for some people it might be like, they're saving slugs. You know what I mean? Like they're in order to, make it, I don't know, I guess like, saving I mean, I'll just say this, right? Because I just feel like it is a weird concept when you mention like slugs and snails and, things like that. But I feel like people would be like, it's, again, when we talked about this in the beginning, it was not a normal concept. I mean, it
does sound weird when you're saying slugs, but you have to understand like the skrill is an alien species.
Oh, right. But that's what I mean.
And they're not just they're not just like a weird snail that are like, I have to save the snails. Like, no, they can talk. Well, they're smart,
ethically, but yes,
they have they have a use. It would be like anything else. Like if you were to say like, oh, I don't know, like the leopards are being experimented on and they're about to go extinct. You're not going to be like, oh, let's go save the leopards because, well, they're fucking leopards. Who gives a shit? No. People are going to go out there and save leopards because they're leopards, right? Like,
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying, like, in the sense of like most, I would say television or movies or things like that, it's not like, of course you might see like slugs and maybe whatever. Kinda, but I mean, you don't normally.
But that's not. I mean, they're not.
I know
they're not just saving skrill.
I know they're not just saving skrill. That was just a story point.
You might have like the Braxolites like going off to maybe another planet, and they have to stop them from doing whatever.
Right. I mean, and like I said, like you said, this is just one story point or storyline. Because there could be multiple. I mean, but again, this is just the starting point to see where this goes. And I get that for sure.
So yeah, some like we said, some might be free, some are hiding, some might be scattered. A lot of the skrill, like after they're free, they do probably will have like a lot of trauma. And this is where, you'll have a lot of like the emotion, I think. And can it be hard, I guess, like to connect with a weird snail-like character? I get it could be.
Well, I mean, again, unless the show ever became to fruition, I mean, it would be a very hard concept to understand now. You know what I mean? Because like, unless we could say, hey, we're going to be, consultants on your show or on the show, then we can get the idea going. I mean, no offense. I mean, that would be all. I would say the slugs wise. I mean, you're not going to use practical effects for it. You're going to be using like special effects on that particular piece of it.
It's all about how you portray them. If you make them feel like they're emotionally part of the story,
well, then yes,
and you're going to care about them.
Correct. But again, that is how you portray it. Because if you don't portray it the right way, you're not going to get shit, and you're basically going to screw up the whole story.
Right.
Which that's what Hollywood is known to do. But anyways, not the point here. Yeah, where are we at, man? Because I feel like we've been kind of.
Sorry,
No, it's okay.
My throat is tore up.
I was just trying to figure out where we are in the notes wise because I was like, man, I'm just trying to learn or listen to try to figure out where we're at. That's all.
Well, we're somewhere within the Skrill encounters. I believe we just kind of were doing the freeing process. Choice of resistance.
That one. Okay.
You know, this is kind of where like they'll they might face some ethical choices. And like I said, this is, I think, right out of the gate, like I don't think like I think you have to show the brutality of what the Braxolites had done to the Skrill. I think you have to show that brutality. And you have to portray them like as a full-fledged character. Because if you don't, then I think you lose a lot of some of this where, you know, when you first meet Grit, like you're not going to give a shit of who he is.
True.
Right? Like, and then when it comes to them, like saving some of these other ones, you know, who gives a shit about some of the ethical choices? Like, do they push to recruit every Skrill that they free?
You're right. I mean, not necessarily.
Do they let some go, even though it might, you know, this one might particularly help later on down the road?
I mean, that's the beauty of the show, you know, like or really of any show where if you're given that creative freedom, especially where an idea where it's new, like there is no, like you don't have a sequel or you don't like there's nothing pertaining to that without, you know, making sure that the blueprint is there.
Do we keep using them as weapons even though it hurts them in the long run?
I mean, like you said, the concepts can be literally could be changing every day, every other day, whatever. But as long as, you know, you basically like what you said, you know, establish the story, you know, get the characters in place, make sure that people learn about these characters and, you know, whether or not they're important, not important, whatever, as long as you understand that and know where they're at. And hopefully in like, especially the first episode, because that's really the hook. If you can't get somebody to watch your first episode and they're like, well, what the fuck am I watching? Like, then you've already failed as somebody who's already trying to create something out of basically your ass, or at least out of thin air.
Yeah. You know? So, I mean, a big like motivating, like what I used as far as like a prompt example to kind of get me to this point, as far as like the Skrill and making them like who they were, you know, ventured way far off. But the actual game High on Life is a pretty big like if you ever played that game, like, you know exactly where the show almost goes.
Yeah.
But I know you've played the game.
I haven't played all the way through, but yes, I do understand the game.
And I know like when you're walking around and you see some of the other weapons, and the weapons that you actually use are the aliens, which I was like, I wouldn't have gone that way because I think playing something fleshy like that is gross, but that would be, no.
Oh, real life? No, absolutely not. But no, I get what you're saying.
And some of the other weapons are just weird, like shooting off little baby they go, and they shoot off like little things and they run after. Yeah. But
yeah.
When you're playing the game, like you actually are walking around like some of the labs, and you actually see like the equipment hooked up, and they're like, you know, some of them are broken up and they're not moving or anything, but you can actually see like the dead ones that they've experimented on, and you have that emotional connection of going, oh my gosh, like they're like fucking ripping them apart, you know, like.
True. I mean, granted, that game is also ridiculous on so many levels.
Oh yeah, no, that
I mean, the makers of the game is actually the same people that basically created Rick and Morty. They just did it differently. But anyways, no, I agree that, having that same idea where, you're taking weapons and, you're using them for, in the game, you're more of a, well, I guess he becomes a mercenary or an assassin, whatever you want to call him. I would say mercenary, I guess, if you want to call it, but like, it goes after like certain people, whatever. The problem is aliens are invading Earth, and then his household gets basically transported to wherever, I can't remember what fucking planet it is, but point is
they invade Earth so that they can take humans to get high.
Right. Right.
Yeah, they're using humans to get high.
Right. And I think, didn't they use it for other things or was it just to get high?
No, they were using humans to get high because humans somehow made people really high.
Yeah, for whatever.
Or aliens really high. I don't know.
Whatever the case was. But yeah, no, I mean, again, not going down that rabbit hole, but like, yes, I understand at least with the weapons wise, like where you were going with the Skrill and that same, kind of space in that, category. So, which makes sense.
Yeah. So, obviously like the Skrill are a big part of it, not every part of it. Cause we will go on, certain paths where, obviously Kaze will have his own kind of arc and Zip will have his own arc and Black Maiden and their crew will have their own arcs as well. And I think that that's kind of a big thing.
Damn, man, what's going on with you?
I don't know. My throat is ripped up.
Stop sucking so much. You know what?
So some of the key themes I think with as far as like the Skrill and their arc is, freedom versus weaponization, and I think it's like the battle between natural instincts and forced modification become like a major theme, and this is where the crew like have to balance using the Skrill as allies while protecting like the freedom from being exploited. And I think that's really huge because, yeah, you on one hand, like what they're doing is freeing them. But on the other hand, if you don't use them as weapons, you're fighting an alien species that can just annihilate you.
True. Very true. I mean, yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I mean, that's pretty much, yeah. Right. There's nothing really else you could say in that.
Another one, trauma and healing. Many Skrill have traumatic histories that will be explored within the show. It'll delve into how they reclaim their identities after being used as weapons. And I think that's not just dealing with the trauma, but like the healing aspect of it too. Like, rescuing and then dealing with that trauma and then figuring out how they can heal from that too.
Yeah. I mean, I would say this. I mean, if, you're basically a slave in that sense, because that's basically what they were, reclaiming your identity. You're talking about traumatic experiences. You're dealing with a lot more just self-identity issues and so on and so forth. I mean, but, it's just, I feel like the show in some ways, moving forward, I mean, it could, even though, yes, it's all about sci-fi and, alien races and species and, enslaving one another versus like, trying to free away from, their captors and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you could easily put into, I would say like lessons, things that you can, just like in some shows where they kind of like, you can relate to humans in a sense, without having to be, well, look, there's humans in the show. Like, no, like you can actually show that emotion, that struggle, that pain, that, whatever it may be and show it in a,
and that's why, I think that's why I picked a show instead of a film. Because I think if you were to do a film on this,
it'd be tough.
You would have to at least do like a trilogy of movies. Like you wouldn't be able to really do it justice. I think a TV show you'd be able to really dive into.
Well, I feel like you could do a TV show and then maybe you could turn it into a movie or whatever, depending on how they do. You know what I mean? And so there's always those kinds of possibilities. And I know that, yes, I understand that. I would say you and I have talked about this before, but you know, how basically cinema in some ways, you know, it may or may not be really a thing anymore. And I'm like, I do understand and I agree, but it depends. It depends on how they, you know, they make movies from here on out. You know, do they, you know, make a movie and then they're like, oh, we're going to do a TV show, or is it like, okay, we're going to do a TV show and then maybe make a movie later on, depending on what it is. And it also depends on, you know, you and I have talked about this before, but like even streaming, you know, where, you know, most people would rather wait for it to be on streaming now instead of go to a theater.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's where, you know, who knows? Who knows what in the next, let's say 10, 15 years from now, what really movies and TV shows will be at this point.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think you make as much money as on a TV show right away than you would
for
a movie. So,
well, I agree.
I think there will still be movies, but
it just probably won't be as prevalent in some ways.
Yeah.
That's all.
So the last couple of these are moral ambiguity. Oh,
can you try that? Moral ambiguities.
Ambiguities.
Ambiguities. I'm being a little. Yes. Now you got me screwed up.
So the crew face tough choices about whether to push the Skrull to fight or allow them to choose their own fate. Like for example, Zig in the show will most likely, like, he'll be struggling to with the temptation to like kind of be like, I need to collect as many as possible. I need to, you know, basically like I need to use them and to be able to protect myself and, you know, the people that I'm with. Not really like understanding and realizing necessarily like that the Skrull really want to make their own choices after they've rescued them, you know what I mean? So he's just kind of like falling into that trap of like, no, they are weapons and we can use them to fight, instead of like, wait, these you know, these Skrull really do deserve to be freed or make their own choice. You know, so that's kind of the, you know, the moral choices that they would have to make. And then, you know, diverse responses to freedom. Not all Skrull will have the same view of freedom. Like we said before, some might want to be left alone. Some might want to join the fight. You know, it all would depend on each of the different backstories that they would have.
I mean, it's interesting though, especially about freedom, or at least that word, you know, where, I mean, you can even look back in history and things like that. It's just, it's nice to see that you can even say, hey, you know, as a, you know, a species, you know, you're like, whether you want freedom or not, you're like, you're given that choice, right? And like, if you don't want to join the fight, you don't want to do all that, you know, that's on you at the end of the day. But, you know, don't complain when, you know, certain things are happening the way they are and you're like, oh, you know, whatever. But I just, it's nice. Like I said, I understand it's AI doing this, but like, you know, seeing those ideas, or at least the concepts, especially in a show like this, it's nice to see that, you know, just what we would consider freedom is totally different for anybody else, you know, like, or whatever their point of view is, especially in this case where, you know, maybe they don't mind being enslaved, or maybe they don't mind doing that, or, you know, maybe they're like, no, man, I'm sick and tired of you firing, you know, crystals out of my butthole, or, you know, whatever. I'm sorry. I'm just saying whatever it is, but whatever the case is, but, you know, it's nice to, you know, kind of see those concepts in play, you know, it's because not always, I would say in shows they do that, you know, or given those ideas.
Yeah. I know. I agree.
He's like, yeah, whatever you say, pal, just get out of it. No, I'm joking.
I agree.
But no, like some of the ideas for the show, at least for the episodes, I find it interesting, especially where, you know, for example, like a hostage rescue, you know, like trying to save, you know, somebody on a Braxolite ship, or, you know, let's say destroying a slag hive ship, you know, before it reaches a planet, or, you know, just, you know, little character driven arcs, you know, little, helping a friend or settling some old debts. Like your typical, some ideas that are similar,
I mean, that's where you can have, Black Mane, because, Black Mane's character, she and her crew, I mean, they're smugglers. So you'd have to almost assume like they're going to have debts.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, settling old debts, maybe somewhere along the line, like the Broxolites did exactly the same thing to another planet, and they end up finding this planet and they have to help out somehow.
So you mean the villains helping out another, people that they enslaved?
No, I'm talking about the, K's and the crew. Like,
okay, my bad.
They find this planet and
they've okay.
Already decimated, and they find people that they're like,
Okay, I thought you meant the Broxolites. I'm like, damn.
No, they wouldn't help anybody.
Well, that's what I meant. I was like, damn, what kind of shit are we twisting now? But okay, yep.
All right, so let's go through the last little bit, which is why we think the show would work.
Here we go. First one, Matt, why don't you say that one? Sorry.
So, for me, even though we do have human characters, and I say human in quotations.
Why don't we say human-like?
The story is not based around Earth, and I think this is like key because I didn't want it to be, and this is where, for me, like, the ChatGPT took me to that in being on Earth, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that because that was where the game was on Earth.
Okay.
And I was like, no, this has to be a completely different time frame, a completely different year, and a completely different planet. Like, give me a planet, give me a year, give me whatever you got. And so where the planet starts is Palaxis, which is where Kaze and Zip are from. And ChatGPT gave me 2794. I don't know why, but that's the year that it gave me.
You wanted random. That was random.
It gave me 2794. So that it's set in that year. Kaze and Zip are from Palaxis. I don't know if it's probably on one of the other notes. But the other planets that are, the Skrill and everybody else is from. But yeah, the human characters are not like, it's not centered around Earth because I thought that would be too cliche. Like, oh, they're coming to Earth. Like, oh, that's no, I wanted it to be something completely separate. Like, it needed to be separated from like what we would have known.
Yeah, it's not so like when we talked about, like what it kind of reminds us of and things like that. Like, you don't see, well, first of all, especially Another Planet, I wouldn't say like, I've seen maybe some TV shows go like maybe to around that date or even like the year 3000 and something or whatever, like a little bit further out. But you don't see too many things, especially like that, where, you're trying to do a whole nother galaxy, a whole nother, time frame and, so on and so forth. I mean, yes, I would say in a lot of TV shows or a lot of like concepts that, that we've mentioned before, yes, of course they're going to be like human-like-ish. Not it doesn't have to be a human, but like, what we are as a species. But again,
yeah, well, they'd be, I guess they would be Palaxians, but.
Well, true, but
at that point,
but again, they have like our faces, and so on and so forth.
Right, yeah. Humanoid.
There you go. Humanoid beings. But so here's some of another. I can't even speak. Another reason why it would work: dark, emotionally rich, and world building. So yes, like we've said before, where if it has that HBO raw, like that, it can be a little gory, a little cruel. Like it can be enough where yes, a teen. Well, let me rephrase this. Somebody who's in that PG-13 realm isn't going to be watching probably this show. At least, again, I would say probably most parents wouldn't be like, okay, go ahead, kid. Here's HBO. Go ahead and watch the show. Here you go, kid. No, probably not. I said you'd have to be like, I'm watching it with you and seeing how well it is. But, where this is, again, it's that sci-fi, right? But it has, the elements of comedy, within the story and certain characters. The intention is to create a world, or a universe that's dark, emotional, and tragic. So, it can be uplifting. It can be kind of that tragicness. I mean, because like it was kind of like even when we talked about Spawn a little bit, where like his story being very tragic and very, very serious and very this, but then like there's some funny moments, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, you're like he just decimated the hell out of 3 guys, but it could be like that too, where it just goes back and forth.
If you watch the animated Spawn, series that they made, like. That shit is not funny at all. Like that shit was dark. But yeah, it creates a world, or like we said, a universe that is dark and it's emotional and it's tragic. I mean, you're talking about a world that's like, you're talking slavery, you're talking, experimentation, you're talking about tragic stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's where as humans we can. I mean, I say it, but we can connect, right? We can connect to those ideas because that has happened. That is just kind of like part of our, I hate saying it, but culture, past history, whatever you go, so on and so forth. But then also with like the characters, there's no basically like copy and paste bullshit. It's basically these are true raw. Like characters, and basically there's no like grabbing it from other franchises and putting them in and then trying to mix them all up and do all this. No, like this is you can get as raw as you want to get and as gory or comedic or whatever you want to do with it. So it's basically a builder's imagination. Like here you go, go have fun, and just do something with it. Like that's the whole point of why this could be a good show or even part of that.
Yeah, so, another one, characters with trauma, loyalty, moral dilemmas, and layered arcs. And I think that's why, a big part of why the show would work, because like we said at the very, very start of the episode, none of these characters are overly heroic. Most of them are exactly the opposite of that, actually. They're not very powerful characters, and they are all highly flawed. And that's where, they all come with their own, traumatic amount of scars, and it makes them exactly what I think the show needs in their lead characters. You need a show that is going to have a character that's not already like
strong,
like John Wick, even though like you took a John Wick and like you kill his dog and then all of a sudden he's like times 1,000, you know what I mean? Like it was already like
that's what I meant. He was a strong character where it almost sounds like again, that's why we said in the beginning about like a ragtag team of like losers who are trying to build themselves up to become that heroic crew in a sense. But it's like it's just.
Yeah, and you're doing a show, and it just allows a bigger focus on those character development pieces. Dive into the deeper character arcs to build on those higher emotions and those traumatic scars, and be able to grow with these characters, especially like if you're doing. I mean, the only way that I think this show would work is multiple seasons. Like you'd have to have multiple seasons and having those characters grow and grow.
Oh yeah.
And just branching out like, and that's really where it goes. And it's not just the heroes, it's having truly dark, evil, complex villains with layered arcs of their own. Even though, yes, the Braxolites are aliens, they won't be talking English. I can guarantee you that. Like
I wouldn't expect that at that point.
They will be talking whatever language they speak. But the Braxolites will have an arc of their own within the concept. Even though they are cold, emotionless, they genetically enhance themselves. They're a war-based species. they, do their own experimentations, but they have a motivation, they have a purpose, and they have a drive to do what they do. This is, one of the big things that, ChatGPT gave me about this was that they were dying. Their whole entire species. That was their motivation.
Well,
that was like, what?
No, I mean, you know what? I'm not going to lie. If you think about it, like, especially when you see, I wouldn't say all movies, but there has been a couple that has had that same kind of theme where, they're dying or their core element of the planet is dying and they're like trying to find other ways to like maybe still have their civilization and do all this. But if they're dying as a whole, as a species, not because of the planet, but because of whatever, let's say virus or whatever the case is, because of course now they want to start venturing off and be like, okay, what is the cure? How do we find this? And, are there beings out there that can either help or do we now have to take over and find out what?
So this is where, this is where their genetic enhancements to themselves and their conquest and their evil, complex things that they're doing, becomes like their motivation. Like they could have just reached out to the galaxy. Hey, we're dying. Can you give us a hand? But they decided to turn it into a different direction and go,
as a conquest.
No. We're dying as a species. Let's genetically enhance ourselves. And each time that they do, it gives them like a little bit more time and a little bit more time and a little bit more time.
Again,
they've gone on so long, they don't know any other way. So this is what they just do now. They just one conquest after another. They find this, let's add it to ourselves.
Dude, I'm not kidding. It's just an ongoing conquest to just at that point just take over the damn universe, because they don't understand that, I would feel like it wouldn't matter even if it was us. If somebody was trying to invade, well, guess what? The whole point would be like, well, you're trying to defend your home. Like, you don't want somebody to take away something that is yours, right?
Right.
So in this case, for them, they're just like, we're dying. I don't give a shit what you are or who you are or whatever, and we're just going to keep doing this. But now they're at the point where they're like, oh, well, I guess we got to keep doing this to survive. So unless, somebody can eradicate them, they're just going to keep going. And I get that. And I mean, that is, I'm going to say it. ChatGPT really did a good job with that concept because it's just an ongoing thing. So, I mean, you could go so many different directions with that. And whether or not, they survive or whether or not they keep going on. I think it's brilliant, so kudos to you.
And who knows, like maybe this Skrill actually might have had an answer.
Maybe they did. But again, I look, man, I think ChatGPT right now has done a great job with that so far. But, right, so we got a couple more ideas here, or at least why we would think it. But the commentary on slavery, experimentation, and rebellion without being preachy. So actually, I'm going to let you explain that one a little bit because I'm more curious about that one.
Well, I think, I think it's more going to be, I think, within the show, a social commentary, not like, it's not going to be
like a narrator, right?
Preachy, and it's not going to be like, slavery's bad, like,
okay,
slavery's bad, okay. Like, I think the commentary that slavery and experimentation, and I think visually will tell its own story. It's not going to be like we're trying to portray, certain images where we're saying like, oh, it's bad or it's good. It just is what it is. Like it's going to have a commentary.
Okay.
And we're not going to side one way or another, but you're going to see it, I think, in its purest form against the Skrill. And I think, it's not going to be preachy, and it's not going to be like I think if you do it the right way.
Keywords, right way.
Right. If you do it the right way, you wouldn't necessarily like show it in the the context of what's happening on Earth, or what happened on Earth to other cultures here. Like, you know what I mean?
So,
like you're portraying what's happening within this context of this story.
Hold on. So what you're saying is you're not gonna pull a a Star Wars move and start shoving down another agenda?
I would try not to.
Okay, that's good. I didn't say the show or the people. I just figured I'd let you know, like, we're not doing that. We're not shoving down ideas and saying, hey, we know what's right. Anyways.
That would not be what I would try to do if, I mean, obviously I'm not the creator of the show, but.
No. But I was just simply asking.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to just I'm going to say the last two things and I'll let you do the weapons there. But I'm going to do this real quick. So the other couple ideas or the couple of things of why we would also think so is right is it gets a mix of different sci-fi feels, right? So you got Star Wars, you got Star Trek, Starship Troopers, District 9, Mass Effect. And again, we've said this already. I mean, yes, it is his own concept. It's his own universe in a sense, but yes, it has certain feels to it or certain things that are, kind of similar, but not enough to like, oh, that's copy infringement or, whatever, right? It's enough where I feel like it can do its own thing without having to be like, oh, well, that sounds a lot like this. And you're like, well, no, it's not actually because blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean,
yada, yada.
The whole show, I mean, it's nothing like Mass Effect. It's nothing like District 9. It's nothing like Starship Troopers. It's nothing like Star Trek. And it's actually nothing like it's nothing like those.
I mean, it's got maybe like certain...
If you take how each one feels, it's got a mixture of all of those kind of like mixed together. If you take what the game Mass Effect was, right, and you take the Reapers, for example, okay, the Reapers are what we're doing in that game what the Braxolites basically are doing.
Okay,
maybe not with the experimentation and because their species were dying, but they were just conquering to conquer.
Which I would say the whole experimentation thing, I mean, I don't know what Star Trek we're talking about, but maybe you could say the feels of that a little bit. I wouldn't say Star Wars specifically, but maybe certain parts of Star Trek, depending on which ones you're talking about. But yeah.
District 9, I think the aliens in that movie, they were doing experimentation on humans, I believe.
Oh, maybe shit. It's been a while since I've seen it, but yeah.
If I do remember that, I believe they were doing some experimentation. But it's been a while since I've seen that movie.
Again, that's what I said.
Starship Troopers. I mean, that was just your basic like they were hunting the weird like.
I did my part.
Are you doing your part?
I did my part. You're like, wait, what?
I what?
Anyways, but yes, no. The last thing, even though it's a 90% sci-fi, yes, it also has elements of fantasy. So yes, obviously spaceships, aliens, classify this as a sci-fi, but this will have elements of fantasy as well. So adventure, mysticism, magical creatures, aliens, etc. Right? So like, and I get that. I mean, because when you start to look at sci-fi, it's kind of like when we talk about like two examples that we just talked about too, like Star Wars and Star Trek. Right? Star Trek is very, very sci-fi. There is no like that fantasy where technically, you look at Star Wars, there is that fantasy in it. It has those elements of like certain things from it, but it is considered more of a sci-fi that's where I could say, you can also say, yes, it's similar to where Star Wars is kind of that same, sci-fi, yes, but it also has those elements as well. So yes, you could say there are similarities in that, but talking about like we just talked about, it's not Star Wars, it's not Star Trek, it's not blah 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 blah, right?
Right.
So it's still its own concept without having to copy paste,
Yeah, and it's not it's not like a crazy concept like the mysticism and magical creatures, like it's not going to be like your almost like a Harry Potter Star Wars thing where you're like,
Harry Potter,
oh, they're like magical. No, they're not like magical creatures. Like there's a reason why the Skrill are able to do what they do. Like it can be fully explained, and it's just what if maybe like the the mysticism is because of the mineral that it's like kind of like I almost added Avatar. Not the like Airbender Avatar.
No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
I'm talking the movie Avatar.
Yes, the blue aliens. Yes, I'm well aware. Yes.
For the Skelium, because I think it almost is the same. That's the way like I viewed what ChatGPT was giving me as far as like how the Skelium interacted with the Skrill.
Okay.
Much like how, they put their hair into the tree and like...
Yeah, okay. So I think, I see what you're going with.
You know what I mean? Like they were able to...
It was like the feeling of energy in a sense. And I think that's where, okay.
So the mineral itself has a mysticism to it, which is why the Braxolites wanted it to begin with.
Okay.
But it does something for the Skrill, which is why it was on their planet.
Makes sense. With. Okay.
It's rare everywhere else. Which is why on Palaxis, there was only that one little rock that Kays had found.
Okay.
But gotcha. No one else really knows what it would be.
Right. Until, once you find out the more about the story and everything else, then yes, you would find that out. Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right, Matt. You sent it away, buddy. The last idea or the last reason why we would think this would work.
I don't have another idea. That was the last one.
What, the every Skrill? Unique powers and personalities?
I haven't got nothing else on this list.
That was the one I was talking about. I thought that was the one was that the one you were just talking about?
You just read the last one, man.
Yeah, the sci-fi one, the bottom one. Yes, you're right, but I skipped over that every...
you skipped over that one.
I told you to do that one, is what I say. Okay. You don't pay attention.
So yes, every Skrill will have unique powers and personalities. I think we kind of reviewed some of this, but every Skrill will have unique powers, unique personalities, some defensive, others modified into weapons. Every Skrill has unique ability, personality. Like I said before, they're not cartoony and they're not meant to be some kind of like comic relief. They don't have mouths because they are kind of like slug-like. They speak and feel everything telepathically. Their abilities are naturally occurring to them as defensive reactions when provoked or attacked, and each one's different. This is due to that rare mineral, like we were just saying, that's found only on their small planet. Until the Braxolites invaded, they mined it and then imprisoned most of the Skrill so that they could experiment on them. Some of the Skrill had fled. Others were killed by the Slags. The rest of them were imprisoned.
What a shame.
Or currently being experimented on. So each Skrill will be kind of like unique. They'll have their own unique personalities. Like I said, they're not going to be cartoony or some. Maybe there would be, one that might be funnier.
Yeah, it could be.
But I think in general, like they're not going to be, a funny type of character. Like a lot of them might be very, very tragic. I mean, you might be dealing with. Obviously, yes, you're dealing with slavery, you're dealing with, experimentation, but you're also dealing with trauma. You're dealing with a lot of, very, very tough stuff where these are characters that we're going to be encountering, much like you would in a, an animated movie or a TV show, right? So you might actually encounter some of these Skrill that might just want to die.
True.
Because of how traumatic their experience was.
So, that, like I said, this can go in a lot of different directions as long as whoever decides maybe one day if they ever think, hey, this would be a great TV show. You can go different places with this. That's the whole point. This is a building block. You take where your creative imagination goes and you go on a wild tangent if that's what you want to do. But look at that. Ready? We've given you blueprints. The idea is in
Giving you a
place.
blueprint. And then the next couple of weeks, then we'll be giving you the characters, the human characters, and then we'll be giving you the aliens.
Yep, and giving you just more of a background between them all.
With castings.
Oh, yes, the AI castings to be exact. And some of the, some of them I'm like, or actually, I think I told Matt, I said that I only knew about one individual.
I know a couple. But
The only reason why, again, in the others, I was like, oh, I didn't realize they were in that. Okay, fair enough. Anyways, so I know both Matt and I haven't really sounded so great. We, it is what it is. Unfortunately, we're just getting over some colds and we're working ourselves up here. But okay. Anyways, you know what to do. You can always follow us. You can always send it out to your buddies. You can always do all that fun stuff. Hell, go on our merch store, man. Get a little something maybe for, there's, I don't know, your birthday's coming up, whatever, right? Just send it to your buddies. Be like, hey, man, I got you a free, about to say free t-shirt. I'm sorry, man. We got to make some money if we're ever going to do it. Just look at our store, man. You got the website, You got all kinds of different things in between. You know where to find us, man. If you're listening right now, just send it out to a buddy. Go over to that Walmart. Be like, hey, man, how you doing? I just want to show you this podcast. Whether or not they listen, I don't care. It is what it is. But just, share it, man. That's all we need. That's all we need in our lives right now.
yeah.
Right?
But you can also comment on this episode, whether you're in Spotify or whatever, or just, did ChatGPT lead us down the wrong direction, or did it do a pretty good job? I think it did a pretty good job.
I think so far it's been doing a good job. And I think it'll be interesting to see the castings next week, and then kind of see the ideas of those aliens the following week. But I'm going to say it, man. We've had a good time. But until next time.